Today on Dealcasters, we're joined by Jerry Potter, who's the founder of Done by Lunch Entrepreneurs and the host of the social media marketing talk show. He's helped thousands of content creators slash their work hours in half while actually growing their businesses through his groundbreaking Modcast system. Jerry's here to show us how we can transform your podcast from a time-consuming obligation into a high-leverage asset that works for you 24/7 so you can be done by lunch and finally have time for the things that matter most in your life. So welcome aboard, Jerry. We appreciate you joining us, man.
Hey, Chris, Jim, great to be here. I'm excited to break all this down and talk products and the whole deal.
It's awesome, man. And you know, I think what I really love to start with, because when I first came across you on the interwebs, this is the thing that really got me interested in a lot of your content. Can you please talk about sort of the origin of why you decided, you'd been an entrepreneur for a number of years, but why you had decided to go this route in terms of your whole system of, I'm going to call it time management, but I know that's an ugly phrase that we maybe don't use. But what was the turning point? What really made you decide to do what we're talking about today?
Well, yeah, we can talk about how time management is slightly different, but before the pandemic, I had two young kids. I still have two kids, obviously, but I had two young kids, and I don't know if they knew that I even had a job, right? I would take them to school or daycare. I would come home, and that's kind of how it was. And I liked that, right? I never wanted to be the dad that's like, oh, he works all the time. I never wanted to fall into that place where we say, oh, well, I'm doing it so we can take better vacation, so I'm not going to be there for dinner tonight or anything like that. But when the pandemic started, we were all at home all the time. And all of a sudden, it came out, my oldest, who's now 15, said, Dad works all the time. And it was this heartbreaking thing because I already knew that I worked way less than most people and most entrepreneurs. Now, I wasn't doing the 20 to 25 hours done by lunch thing quite yet, but for the most part, I was only working a really reasonable amount of hours, 30, maybe 35 hours a week. And so it broke my heart when he said that. And so that was the catalyst that kind of made me think, okay, how can I design this, still do what I want to do, and not carry that. I don't think there's any guilt stronger than parental guilt.
It's
It is
true.
the strongest guilt. I remember when we were pregnant with our first, and my wife Candy and I were shopping and looking at car seats, and she's like, we need to get this car seat, and it's like $300. And I'm like, well, what about this one that's like $150? And she's giving me this look like, oh, so if something happens to them because you got cheap on a car seat, you're going to carry that. And I'm like, no, forget it. Get the $500 car seat. So parental guilt is heavy. And that was the thing that kind of kicked this off for me and made me want to figure this out for myself and for other people.
Oh, that is so. I feel every moment of that. How much is your child worth? Is it worth an extra $50 for this chair? And then not only that, but there's just a ton of different things. So I really would love to kind of break this down. But before we do that too, I think a lot of people, and not by fault of yours, but by fault of predecessors, our grandfathers on YouTube, when YouTubers hear work less, get more money, they immediately think there's a catch, right? They immediately think, why should I trust Jerry Potter, who's talking about I'm going to be done by lunch, when I've clicked on all of these thumbnails of these guys going, I'm coconuts and yachts, and I've got, look at all the money I've made from just working, 2 hours a day or working 3 days a week or whatever the phrase is. Yeah. What would you say to somebody who is somewhat skeptical about your system?
Well, so first I'll say there is a catch. Okay, there's absolutely a catch, and I'll tell you what it is here in just a second. But to go back to that idea of time management and time freedom, I do have to admit that I lied to my clients for years. I had clients and members that would say, how do you get so much done in so little time? And I've always been kind of like an efficiency nerd. I always want to make the most of my time. And so I would say, I batch my content. Here's how I arrange my calendar. I've got these times blocked off for deep work, which stuff that I did. But time management only saves minutes or maybe hours if you do it really well. And what I'm talking about, which is like real-time freedom, this is where we're talking about saving days, weeks, or even months over the course of the years. And the key to it is to take all of the things we do that are low leverage and replace as many of them as possible with high leverage things, or what I call high leverage assets, or HLAs, one of which is a podcast on YouTube, which we can talk about. So if we think about our businesses, we have three things that we need. The first thing we need is traffic, right? Leads. We need new people to find out who we are and come into our world all the time. The second thing we need is some sort of conversion, some way to convert people into clients, customers, members, students, whatever it happens to be. And then the third thing we need is a way to deliver whatever our offer is, right? If it's Amazon, they're shipping stuff to your house. That's how they deliver. But if you're an online entrepreneur, you can replace a lot of those. So traffic can be replaced with a high leverage asset like YouTube or podcasting. Conversion can be replaced with high leverage assets like automatic email sequences or evergreen webinars, things like that. And then delivery can be replaced with things like group programs, memberships, courses, digital products, different things like that. Now, everybody can't do all three of those, right?
Right.
But even if you just replaced one, like the traffic, with something as high leverage as YouTube, then it changes everything, because now, like, it's hard. I couldn't stop working after lunch if I was like, oh God, I don't have enough leads. Where am I going to get my leads? Right. It's hard to like give that up. So the reason that we talk about YouTube, and here's the catch. YouTube takes work in the beginning, but over time, and this is how I define these high leverage assets, or HLAs, is they become less work over time, and the value of them goes way, way up. So if we take YouTube and podcasting as the example, in the beginning, you're going to have to create a good piece of content every week. It's not as hard as I think people think it needs to, like, or think it is, but it does take work, and it's going to be slow in the beginning. I never like to, we see all these stories, and some of them you were talking about, like, oh, I went viral and in 2 months, now I make $50,000 a month, and, this whole thing. And I always like to tell a more realistic story, which was mine. And that is that I almost quit multiple times during my first 6 months on YouTube. I was, chipping away, and, there were many days, if you look at your analytics, there were many days with 0 views, 0 new subscribers, and it's disheartening. And it took me 6 months to get to 100 subscribers. And so I look back at that, and I think I would have quit so many times if I didn't commit to it for a year. I told myself I can put up 1 video a week for a year. So I did that, or else I would have quit. Okay. But I got there to 100 subscribers. A month later, I had 1,000. A year later, I had 10,000. And I had 100,000 views in my first 12 months. Mm-hmm. And so this is where I always like to ask people, like, serious question. If you knew you could reach 100,000 people searching for the thing you do in the next 12 months, could you commit to 3 to 6 months of discomfort to get it going? Yeah. And the fact that it's hard is good, or else everybody would do it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yes, excellent point. And so if we could sit here for a minute and talk about that, because I think when a lot of people, they don't have the, I guess, patience, right? But when you're powering through this stuff, your first 6 months, do you feel like for you, it was more about like getting the reps in and developing cadences and developing the type of content and, it's structuring your videos a certain way? Or maybe was it like trying to find what is resonating with people and figuring out like, okay, this is landing, so I need to navigate my content that way. So like in that growth period, Jerry, what was, what kept you going? Like I know you dedicated yourself, right? But there had to been some aha moments along the way in months 1 through 6 where you said, okay, this is sending me down this path, and so I'm going to keep going down this path.
Yeah, I actually just emailed my list this morning about focusing on the right numbers. And so when it comes to podcasting, I say, in the beginning, focus on uploads, not downloads. Like, are you publishing? Because that's where it has to start. When it comes to YouTube, focus on, if you're a business owner, focus on leads, not views. And that was kind of what it was. So I did get discouraged a lot during that first 6 months. But then I realized it was because I was looking at the wrong numbers. And these are the numbers that none of us will see in our YouTube analytics. But when I looked back, I realized I got my first paying client from YouTube when I had 17 subscribers. I think I was 11 days after I published my first video. So There were
Wow.
moments like that kept me going. By the time 2 months had passed, I think I was at 28 subscribers. Woo! But I'd booked 2 paid speaking gigs, not
Boom.
because I had a big channel or a lot of views, but people saw me and saw that I knew that I was what I was talking about and that I had something unique to say. And so what I always kind of tell people is don't look at your analytics. They'll drive you crazy in the beginning. Just look at those other types of numbers. Look for those other signals. And then no matter what, you're going to get better podcasting as well. You're going to get better at talking about your thing. You're going to get better at creating content. You're going to get better at, at selling. You're going to get better at all of these things just by, like you said, putting in the reps. And one more thing too, before I did this, I sometimes I don't think we all realize like how lucky we are now. You know that Target sells, as does Amazon, obviously, but sells lighting and microphones and, Stream Deck button pushers, all these different things, right?
Yeah.
Before I got into being more of a content creator like this, I worked as a radio personality for 20 years. And I had to have, oh yeah. I guess that's not so much in my bio anymore. But yeah, my wife and I hosted a morning radio program.
Nice.
And so we had to have a company decide to pay us. They had to have a deal with the FCC here in the US, right? The government body that regulates transmission. They had about 100,000 watt signal. They had to go out and sell this, sales team had to sell ads. Like there was all this stuff. And then when the company decided they didn't need you anymore, they could just say, bye-bye. And so my wife and I, we worked together. We got let go 3 times in 5 years near the end, with economic changes or format changes. Ratings were good. We didn't do anything scandalous. They're just like, sorry, we're going in a new direction. Bye. And once we became parents, that got really scary to lose your, both salaries, health insurance, like everything. Wow. So I think back to what was required to be a content creator then. But now any of us can go on to Amazon or even in our local stores, get the stuff and create media just all on our own. And it's even gotten better in the last couple of years with editing tools and things getting better.
We'll get right back to the show, but first, I wanted to tell you about the School of Podcasting, the #1 place to learn about podcasting, brought to you by the amazing Podcast Hall of Famer, Dave Jackson. I'm a member, and it's a fantastic place for podcast courses, a super helpful podcast community, and unlimited, that's right, unlimited podcast coaching. The link to check it out is here in the show notes, or you can head on over to sop.dealcasters.live and tell Dave that Dealcasters sent you. Now back to the show. Yeah, it's tough for me to hear someone complain about, like a streaming platform. Oh, like this streaming platform, I can't believe, like it did. Are you serious right now? Like, you just told that story about being in broadcast radio, and I can't tell you how long I've spent, over the years trying to record something, sort of back in the day, or making music, and sticking in 52 floppy disks into my computer and things like that. It's just like, we live in an incredible time where you can do this creator economy. And sort of back to what you're talking about with YouTube, I think, do you feel like when people, and you work with a lot of people, in training and coaching with YouTube and being involved in their journeys as well, you feel like a lot of people get stuck because they're trying to achieve this monetization, right? And they think that once they cross the 1,000 subscriber, 4,000 watch hour mark or whatever, that all of a sudden, they're going to see, the Brinks trucks are going to be backing up into their driveways, and they're going to be seeing all of this money, and that this is what they're going to do, is to become sort of pro YouTubers, and that this AdSense money that YouTube is going to provide them like a way to live. Do you feel like that's part of the problem, is that people aren't looking at KPIs like you're talking about, like I'm a speaker and this is going to get me more, gigs here, or I'm an author and I'm going to sell more books or courses or whatnot? Is that where things get convoluted?
I think some, but less so for your audience and my audience of entrepreneurs and business owners. One of the things I'll tell people is say, oh, I want to be a YouTuber. The only time I ever refer to myself as a YouTuber is with kids, because kids think it's cool, right? Yeah. Otherwise, I'd never say I'm a YouTuber.
Right.
So for me, and the thing I like to remind all of us of is we don't have to hit 1,000 subscribers. We can literally monetize in our first podcast episode, in our first video, because we already have our own offers to sell. They say in podcasting, it's like, oh, as soon as you're getting 10,000 downloads per episode in the first week, you can earn a full-time living. That's a lot of working for free for like years and years and years. So,
Yeah.
so what I tell people, first, you can monetize, but it's not like, yeah, I got my first client with 17 subscribers, but it's not like, oh, I'm quitting my job now. Here we go. It was one client, and I think I did a few hours of consulting or something like that. But the thing that I think really holds people up is just simply that the ROI is not there fast enough. And then the other thing I found from a lot of the clients that I work with is it is really scary to put ourselves out there, right? So often. And that maybe I was just oblivious, or maybe because I was on the radio and had already had people complain about me for years, but I didn't even think about, oh gosh, what am I going to do when I get terrible comments? Now, I didn't like it when it happened. And of course it does happen.
No one does. Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing that, I always like to say, if you have a business where you can help somebody, somebody's out there and they're literally like waiting for your solution, whatever it might be, then we can't let our own insecurities get in the way of getting in front of those people that actually need our help. And then together, right, we can help them, then they can help somebody else. There's this beautiful ripple effect, but also then you can earn a living and you can have an online business and you can have location freedom and time freedom and all of these other great things that come from it. So it kind of comes down to, which is worse, working 70 hours a week or getting a comment occasionally that points out that one of your eyeballs is bigger than the other one, is something I learned from my YouTube audience.
Now I will never stop looking at your eyeballs.
I know. Yeah. There.
So Jerry, you bring up a really good point, right? You're working with businesses. I've seen this in my community when I've gone to a lot of these networking events, that a lot of these business owners aren't on YouTube, right? They haven't even made that first video, and they're like, well, why would I want to be on there? And I don't know if it goes back to what Chris is talking about, like they think, oh, I got to get all these subscribers and all these view hours, as opposed to, well, I don't know what you do. So if you educate me, right now, I start to get an idea, because I'm searching for, how to fix this or that. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, this person's actually in my backyard and they've just showed me their expertise. Do you see that a lot? You think it's that, like you said, they'll go on a Facebook, post, but they don't think about, this is a search engine where people are looking for what you're offering. What do you think the disconnect becomes?
I think there's something to that, but it's also, even though we talked about how, we all carry HD 4K video cameras in our pocket, right? We all have the gear. The tech is not nearly as complicated as it used to be, but it's still a higher, barrier of entry than just posting on Facebook or posting on Instagram. And so what I think people do is they go for what they know, right? That's just, oh, well, this is what I do, or this is what everybody in my industry is doing. And so the way I like to talk about this is I go back to that high leverage, low leverage thing. So if I was to start a brand new business tomorrow, I had no audience, no email list, no YouTube channel, like nothing. I would immediately dedicate 1 to 2 hours a week to a YouTube channel, and also with a podcast on it. And you can do it in a couple hours a week and do it really well with what we have, these days. But on the other side, I would probably still need leads faster if I needed income, right? And I was sitting there at zero. So then I would do other things to get leads that would be low leverage tasks. So I would go, like one of the things I did before YouTube was really giving me what I needed, I went into Facebook groups and I just helped people, right? And then they go click on my profile and they'd see a lead magnet and they join my email list. I would network on LinkedIn. I would go to people, in-person events. I would get on, Zoom calls with other people and try and say something that sounded intelligent. And those things that they work, they totally work, but they're really low leverage. And so what I always encourage people to do, it's like, yeah, if you need to do that right now, keep doing that. But also start building this high leverage asset, because once it kicks in, I don't know, I assume it would be weird if you guys knew a lot about bamboo. I didn't know a lot about bamboo until I read this, but I call YouTube the bamboo for a platform. There's some types of bamboo that in the beginning you have to like water and nurture them like crazy. Cool. And then they shoot up like 90 feet in 6 weeks. So that's how I look at YouTube. In the beginning, yep, it's going to be more work, but man, eventually you're going to have this big, tall bamboo stuff. It's not a very good example in terms of usability. Tree is better, right? In the beginning, you got to plant the tree, you got to protect it a little bit. But then eventually you grow this big asset and it gives you food and shade and, all kinds of other stuff. As maybe branches fall off, you can build stuff. You can do a lot of things with trees, but we have to plant it. That's the thing from the very beginning.
You said 1 to 2 hours a week. And that just feels just inordinate, like super low to me. Like I when you started to say 1 to 2 hours, I was like 1 to 2 hours a day. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, that makes sense. You 1 to 2 hours a week, Jerry? That feels like, a focused 1 to 2 hours a week feels like not very much time.
So it feels like I rented a Lamborghini and I'm just telling you, I'm making one of those
where's
videos
my coconuts and yachts on this, Jerry?
That's fair. I recently gave a talk at the Social Media Marketing World Conference. Jim and I were talking on the pre-show that he's been many times. And the last part of the talk, which was about podcasting on YouTube, was in about an hour a week. And at the very beginning, I was like, how many of you are skeptical about this? And, almost everybody's hand went up. I was like, okay, good. It's my job to show you otherwise. But there's two pieces to this, okay? Number one is, and I say this as a recovering perfectionist, we do have to let perfectionism go. We think, like, we have this perception of what YouTube needs to look like, depending partially on what we watch on YouTube. One of the biggest problems with all the platforms, TikTok or anywhere else, is that we see literally, when we log in, the best content being produced in the entire world.
Yeah.
And we think we have to do that, right? Because it's a curated feed. Here's, when TikTok started, here's the best dancers in the world, right? And then it evolved and all this different stuff. And so
we'll get right back to the show, but first I wanted to tell you about Stream Like a Boss with the amazing Tanya Smith. Whether you're a coach, consultant, or creator, Tanya's got that magic to turn your live streaming skills into a powerful lead generation engine, transforming those chirping crickets into cash-paying clients with a revolutionary boss framework. The link to check it out is here in the show notes, or you can head on over to streamlikeaboss.tv. Hey, and tell Tanya that Dealcasters sent you. Now back to the show.
YouTube did a big study last year to find out what exactly made for a satisfying YouTube video experience. And they did this partially around the idea of podcasting being on YouTube. More people are watching YouTube in their living rooms now, on their couches. They're watching longer form content. And they didn't just ask people, hey, are you satisfied? They actually connected sensors to people's brains as they watched YouTube videos. And one of the things that they found was that the viewer feeling an emotional connection with the thing that they were watching or the person or people in the video always trumped any sort of technical quality, fancy editing, anything like that. And that the only time that editing in a certain way improved the satisfaction of the viewer and watch time and all that other stuff was if it actually improved the emotional connection. So I'm sure there are some videos where you can add the perfect emotional song at the perfect emotional moment like Hollywood does, and it maybe makes a difference. But overall, we don't need that. So if you want to do this in 1 to 2 hours a week, I look at it as, let's make one search optimized video per week, something that people are looking for, that your audience is looking for, the people you want to attract. Literally just help them solve that problem in the video, nothing more. It can just be you talking to the camera. It doesn't need to have a lot of fancy editing. I don't mean just like go live and stick with that. Take a cool like transcript based editing tool that we have these days and actually go through and tighten it up at least. But make that, put it out there. And I really think that that's all it takes. And that's a lot of what I was doing in the beginning. And that's literally doing one video a week. Now, if you want to be even more efficient than that, and again, I'm a recovering perfectionist. I'm also an overthinker. So I know all about how to take anything and make it 10 hours, take 10 hours. But we have the tech and all these other things where we can batch in such a big way. And so even if you are a solopreneur, you have nobody else on your team, just to put you where I was when I started YouTube, I was my wife was still, we have a family, we're still together now, but she worked evenings. So I was basically working full time, 2 young kids. I think my oldest was 7 at the time. And I was in charge of everything in the evening, from picking up from 2 different schools, getting dinner ready, cleaning up, bath time, shower, all of that. And she would come home right before bedtime. And so even with that, I found a way to put out a video every week. And the workflow was basically when I had some free time after the kids went to bed, I would plan my videos. Once a quarter, I asked my wife to take the kids somewhere for a few hours on a Saturday. I didn't own any lights. I stood in front of a window and hoped it was cloudy. We lived in Seattle at the time, so there were a lot of cloudy days.
There
so that
you
worked.
go.
And I filmed 15 YouTube videos in a row.
Wow.
And
Did you change your shirt?
No. No. I even talked about that in some of the videos. I was like, look, if you are here for the fashion, you are on the wrong channel. Now, it wasn't like now. Now I mostly wear superhero t-shirts, which are a little more defined.
Awesome.
At the time, it was just a gray polo. But I was like, look, if you're here for the fashion, this is not the place for you. And then each week because I was mostly making social media videos and they like to change things every 10 minutes, I would edit the video usually a night or two before it came out just to make sure it was still up to date. And then I would publish every Thursday. So if you decide it's important, then we find a way, right? And we make it happen.
Now, Jerry, you've seen a lot of changes with YouTube over time, and I guess sometimes we're seeing this like, oh, you got to do shorts. It's all this short attention span sort of stuff. Do you think that that's important, or do you think you should still focus on, you want to call it the longer form content? And what is that number? Is it a 10-minute video? Is it a 20-minute video? Do you think there's like a magic number that gets people attracted to your content?
Yeah. So let's talk about the length first, because I was just looking at my numbers yesterday, and the top 2 videos that I've put out in the last 6 months, one of them is 5 minutes long and one of them is 24 minutes long. So there is no, perfect length. And people hate this answer, and I would hate it too. How long should my videos be? Well, as long as it needs to be to deliver the transformation or the answer that you're promising in the video, right? That's it. So as far as shorts go, they are, they get a lot of attention, but you talk to a lot of people on TikTok. It's really hard to do lead gen on TikTok. And shorts is the same way, because you're literally swiping through. And even if maybe you love the video, you click that like button, you comment it, 3 videos later, you probably don't remember whose it was. Right? Shorts can be up to 3 minutes now. So if somebody's who's literally swiping, because that's all the time they have, is willing to sit through a video that long, maybe you can make a bigger impact. So I tell people, go all in on the long form videos. YouTube now officially calls them VODs, or videos on demand. My friend Jessica started calling them pants. So we had YouTube shorts and pants. So internally, I like to call them YouTube pants now. But that's where the attention is. That's where people are going and what they're watching when they can't find an answer on ChatGPT. They're going to YouTube to look at this stuff.
Interesting. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about the crafting of that content, because we're talking about the length of content, and then not necessarily the medium, shorts, long form, landscape, portrait, whatever, but more like okay, I was today years old when I found out that you were doing a morning radio show with your wife. Is there a jingle like Jerry and wife in the morning?
Oh yes. So there were many jingles over the years.
Amazing. What did you learn from the maybe the psychology of radio programming? How are you applying that to what you're doing now? Because those that have come from broadcast know that there are cadences and all these things, but there is science behind a lot of that stuff, pattern interrupts, and the structure of things. What did you learn maybe from that broadcast that you're applying to what you're doing on YouTube?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right, because there were literally, if we couldn't hold attention in radio, there were millions of dollars in ad revenue on the line.
Yep.
And so maybe I shouldn't have told you we got let go 3 times in 5 years, because it sounds like we weren't good at what we did, but we did. We were very successful. We did 15 years of radio. But to just give you an idea, we had to create 15 hours of content a week. That's not counting songs and commercials. So when we're now thinking, when you say, oh, how can you create a good piece of content an hour or 2 a week? It's like, well, because you used to have to create 15 hours worth of content. But the main thing that I took from radio is the way that we approached our content. And we didn't look at it as, one big piece of content or even individual pieces of content. We looked at them as pieces that kind of worked together. And so in our radio show, when we plan out our show, we would have what we call them modules. Sometimes on TV, you'll hear them say, in our next segment, organic a pizza snack that your tweens will love, or whatever it might be, right? But we call them modules. And each module had a different job for the show. So of course it was supposed to be entertaining and have people listening, but one module's job was to get new people to listen, right? And so that might have been like a big giveaway that we ran TV ads or something for. Another module might have been designed to get somebody to come back and listen later that same day. Another one to get new people engaged. Another one to get people to come back and listen again 2 days later at the same time. So each module had a job, and then together they became this powerful, like overall like brand. More content on the air, more content online, and more content offline. So when I decided to start podcasting for my business, you guys have probably seen that stat that like 99% of podcasters don't make it to episode 21, I think it is.
Oh, yeah.
You've seen that?
Episode 7.
Well, 90% don't make it to episode 4. And then, so they say if you make it to episode 21, you're in the top 1% of podcasts.
We'll get right back to the show, but first I wanted to tell you about Social Media News Live. Jeff C. and his amazing guests will keep you up to date on what's happening in this entire changing world of social media. They talk with industry experts and innovators and creators about the latest social media news, tips, and tactics, and they broadcast live, so you can ask the questions that matter most to you and your business. Jim and I love this show, and we know that you will too. Head over to socialmedianewslive.com. Hey, tell them Dealcasters sent you. Now back to the show.
And so traditional podcasting doesn't work. There's been a lot of, and I love this industry, but there has been a lot of people that have been sold a dream, build a great show. They'll come. I'm in a lot of Facebook groups about podcasting, and people will say, how do I, what do I do? And people will say, well, until you've published 100 episodes, just keep focusing on the quality and it'll all come together. But unfortunately, traditional podcasting doesn't have a discoverability piece, right? Very few people are going to be mentioned in Forbes or make it on a new and notable chart on Apple, especially where we are now, right? Maybe 10 years ago when there weren't as many shows. So,
right.
So we just, when my wife helped me plan the first kind of podcast I did for my business to be on YouTube, and we didn't look at traditional podcasting. We went back to radio, and we built a show out of modules, which we now affectionately called Modcasting, which I love that you had the word, this made up word that means a lot on the movie poster, whatever you want to call it for this episode, right? So it's called Modcasting, and it's module-based podcasting. And it's the same premise. Each part of your show is designed to do a certain thing that creates a bigger show overall. And the quick rundown I'll give you, there's 5 core modules. Is it okay if I break it down? I don't know how we're doing on time.
Oh, yeah.
We're absolutely fine. Got all the time in the world.
Okay. So we customize the shows. You have different modules depending on what your goals are, your objectives as a business. We primarily work with business owners, not hobbyists. But the 5 core modules are essentially these 5 modules you're going to have in every show. The first one, actually, before I tell you what they do, just is the whole idea is that they're designed so your episodes, and you could apply this to videos too, become a complete marketing funnel all by themselves. So the first module we call the confirmation module. And a lot of podcasters, the mistake they make is they assume that when somebody lands on their episode, they already know what it's about. I don't know about you, but I add my episodes to a queue. And so sometimes I'm out hiking and a new episode comes on. Like, you got to tell me what you're going to talk about. But more than that, we go deeper. It's more than just a hook. The confirmation module is designed to help somebody, like, not only want to listen to the show, but like really lean in, like make it relevant for them. How is this going to change their life? So we don't go, in this episode, we're going to do this, and then we jump right in, right? We talk about it a little more. And this does a couple of things. One, it makes it so that they hopefully listen closer. Maybe it's the one that they stop multitasking and they listen when they can pay more attention. But also, if we get a little long-winded in the middle or go on a tangent or it gets boring or, whatever, they might stick through that part until we get back to the thing. They stick through the tangent. So first is the confirmation module. Next, we call the vibe check module. That's basically a podcast intro. So you guys had a great one at the beginning of this, all the clips from the different shows. But a lot of podcasters tend to assume nobody's ever like nobody new is ever coming in.
Right.
Which is a really negative way to look at your show.
Yeah.
Right. So the idea is the confirmation module tells them, here's what this episode's about. The vibe check, and it doesn't have to be long, the vibe check shows them like what the overall idea of the show is. So my wife Candy named it that, and it's kind of like, yeah, we're going to check the vibe. This is what this is about. Next is the core content module. This is the reason they listen to the show. This is whatever your topic, your title is, that's the main thing. Then from there, we go into the conversion module, which is the most important one for us as entrepreneurs, because that's when they're going to do the thing that we want them to do. Go buy the product, go download a freebie, join our email list, join our newsletter, go check out a live stream, go check out our product list on Amazon for you guys, whatever it might be. And it's much more than just a call to action. One of the things that I learned in radio is, even though we were told all the time, keep it tight, if you just blab through your call to action, nobody will take it. So in radio, before I realized this and learned this lesson the hard way, it was just like, all right, time to play this contest. Here's the phone number once, and hopefully you wrote that down and call now to win, right? And people would call because it was free stuff. But we had a consultant. She was actually a Hollywood screenwriting consultant they brought in to work with us on storytelling on our show. And she said, what if you slow down? What if you actually take the time to explain the contest? What if you spent 20 seconds instead of 6 seconds? And the next day we did that, and the phones rang for 30 minutes after the contest was already on the radio. People just still kept calling. So what I always like to tell people, in whatever you're doing, when you are getting to your call to action, let go of this idea that everyone is going to leave if I do the call to action. Okay. First of all, you're probably 90% of the way through the show. And even if 90% of the people leave, but the other 10% of the people actually do the thing that you want, that's a win. And the 90% aren't bad. If they made it 90% of the way through the show, they enjoyed the show. So we have to get away from this, all right, that's today's show. And if you want to work with me, check out the show notes, right? And actually take the time to get them to do that. But we do want people to not leave, right? We want them to not bail. We want them to listen to it. And so that takes us to our fifth module. So we started with confirmation, the vibe check, the podcast intro, the core content, which is the main content, then the conversion module, and then the last one we call the TSL module. And that stands for one of the ratings that we had when we were in radio. First, we were rated on how many people listened, and then we were rated on how long people listened. And so it was short for time spent listening. So in the online content world, that would be, watch time, watch hours, things like that. And the TSL module does three things, and it's my favorite module. But what it is it's a standalone piece of content at the end of the show, but it's still related to what you just talked about in the episode. Because if somebody comes in and they're listening to the episode because they want to find out about how to start a podcast, and at the end you're like, and by the way, if you want to learn email marketing, I've got this other thing, or here's a tip about email marketing. That's not who's there. Right. So it's a piece of content. It can stand alone. So it keeps people listening to the whole show because you tease it at the beginning. Make sure you stay until the end because I've got this bonus tip about XYZ. Then you tease it again right before your conversion module. So they listen to the conversion module, also increases conversions.
Nice.
And then it's designed to be pulled out and be turned into a YouTube short, a TikTok, a Facebook or Instagram reel, or a LinkedIn vertical video. It's the only format on social media that actually reaches people who don't know who you are yet. And so, again, to recap, the title of the show obviously gets them to click, gets them to listen to the confirmation module. Confirmation module gets them to listen to deeper and listen to the core content. Core content then is followed by the conversion module. More people listen to that because of the TSL module, which also then becomes a new piece of content that sends people back to the episode. So it becomes this funnel all by itself. And there's more to it than that, but that's kind of the general idea there.
So Jerry, so you bring up a really good, I love, first of all, the modules, but Chris and I, and we won't name names to protect the innocent, we see people that I almost feel like when they get to that part that's the TSL, instead of doing the TSL, they're like, go watch my next video, and you get pissed because you just sat through however many minutes thinking that they're going to tell you something they talked about at the beginning, and they don't actually do it.
Yeah.
You just lost your trust.
Yeah, that's a good way to literally destroy the most valuable thing you have with your audience is trust, and especially a new viewer. So yes, if you say you're going to do something at the end of a video or an episode, do it in that episode. Now, you can still tease something else afterwards. That's a very effective You know, when's the best time to get somebody to listen to another one of your episodes? Well, they're already in their podcasting app or they're already on YouTube on your channel. But no, don't do that because that pisses people off big time. Thank you for bringing that up, Jim.
That whole modular thing is so money, and so the confirmation. Right. I always called it, I learned this from Kirk Nugent, station identification, right? We're going back to broadcast television, I guess. Like, you know, when you get on a plane and you sit down, you're going to hear that boom, boom, you know, this is flight 777, we're headed to Akron. And if you're not supposed to be headed to Akron, what do? You get off the plane, right? Yeah, and so in the case of you're out for a run and then you've got a podcast coming up and all of a sudden these people are talking like you already know them and they're just hanging out talking about nothing. And you want that mental sort of, here's what we do, here's what we're going to, you know, provide to you, and here it comes, you know, and get right to it and not do the chit chat and that whole thing. But the TSL piece for me is like, this is, you know, when I work with clients, we talk about intentional interrupts. So, you know, we're going, they're doing their show, but like, it'll be something like, if there's one thing you remember from this podcast, it's this. Or if you've got a pen and paper, I need you to write this down. Like things like that are like your brain just goes, it's like picking up the needle on a record, you know, or something like that. And, you know, for people like me, a video editor, I know this is the money clip, right? And so that TSL feels like not just that, but like to your point, these are people that have listened and watched all the way through to this point. Like this is, you've got them here. These are your super fans. These are the people that you're like, here's a hill, we're walking up it. Come on, and they're following you up a hill. I love that whole the thinking process through that, and that was the broadcast stuff that kind of brought you to that moment. Your history there,
modified because you know the radio show was more about entertainment. But that was kind of what inspired the idea. Because when we went to start, you know, my wife, like I said, my wife helped me. That's why I say we. But we went to design this first show for entrepreneurship and for YouTube's too. We designed it in that way. Like, okay, how could we piece these together? And then as time has gone on and I've learned more and things like that, and now I teach this stuff, that's when we kind of realized, oh my gosh, this is a whole marketing funnel. Everyone's over there on TikTok trying to get somebody's attention for 6 seconds. And we can put out these longer form pieces of content, pull a piece out of it, and get somebody to go through the whole like funnel in that way. And sometimes they don't. Quick story. I have I had a clip that came out of one of my episodes. I had a guest on, and we put it up on all the short form video platforms. But it went out on Instagram, and it did really well. It reached over 22,000 people. Wow. I don't have 22,000 followers on Instagram. I have about 4,000 or something like that. In fact, that reel only reached 312 of my actual followers. So this was 22,000 people who didn't know who I was yet, seeing a clip of that podcast. And some of those people watched it, and then they went and listened to the full episode and kind of went into the funnel, if you will. But I had one woman who signed up for one of my programs, and she, you know, I always ask, hey, where did you hear about Jerry Potter? And she specifically said, I saw an Instagram reel with you and this other person in such and such. And I was like, oh, cool. That, you know, it's working. Then when the first time I talked to her, I said, so you like saw it and then went and listened to the episode and then kind of like, where'd you go from there? And she goes, oh, no offense. I've never actually heard your podcast. I just saw the clip, your profile. I looked into you. And then I signed up. And so that's the story of how my podcast made $1,000 from someone who never even listened to it. Nice. So, but if you're putting the right stuff out then that kind of stuff can happen, which takes us back. This is high leverage, right? It doesn't get any more high leverage than this. These pieces of content that are out there doing what you need them to do 24/7. So someone can find me, get a solution to their problem, find out how to work with me, and then sign up to work with me in that same day. And I still like to work with people at a high level. Like in my community, I answer all the questions. And like, to me, this business is about people. I never wanted to be one of those people in the videos that you mentioned earlier, Chris, that are just like, oh, I don't talk to anybody. I'm just on a beach because I sell digital products or quilt patterns or whatever. It's always been about the people to me, but this changes everything.
Well, and I love the point that, you know, like this longer form piece can be broken apart and not just to be broken apart, that you can say, hey, I'm on TikTok and I'm also on Pinterest and I'm also on Substack and I'm also on, yeah, okay, put your real estate there, but where are you focusing? But you're putting content there that someone is finding you. Like there is they may never be on YouTube or maybe they're on YouTube, but their algorithm isn't feeding your content yet. And so this is a great way to not bait them, but like get your content in the form that they're expecting there. And, you never know until you start pulling that stuff apart. So I'm curious in terms of pulling stuff apart, Jerry, like you don't have to go dig deep into this process, but you organize everything very well on the front end so that, you're planning this content so that when it's recorded, you have this longer form content. So I'm assuming breakpoints, how that's doing it. Like, what's is it Descript? Is it like how are you doing it? Do you have somebody else that's doing it for you, or how does that work for you?
Nobody else yet, maybe at some point. But I will say, first of all, if you're like me, you see an ad or a video all the time where it's like, I made 282,000 years worth of content in 10 minutes, find out how, there's
Right.
AI tools and things like that.
Yeah.
And the thing that I always like to say, and especially when we talk about, creating things in a high leverage way, is that efficient and effective are not the same thing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are doing things efficiently, but they're not effective, like if you took your long form piece of content and you turned it into all this other content, but it didn't do anything, then that's a waste of time, even if a tool does most of it.
Thank you for saying that. I got it. Like, you are preaching to this member of the choir for sure on that.
Well, they all keep one-upping, right? First, it was like 20 pieces of content in 10 minutes, and then it was 500, and now it's like 10 years worth of content in 8 seconds. So
look at this pile of mediocrity that we gave you for subscribing to this. Yes,
exactly. So my main thing with the approach, and I stopped calling it repurposing, I've started calling it multi-purposing. But the main thing is, I already know, for the most part, what's going to get pulled out before I create the original piece of content. And that's the beauty with this TSL module, is it's already designed to be its own piece of content before you pull it out. Even at the end, if you want to say, if you like that tip, make sure you follow for more. Like, that piece of verbiage works in podcasting. It works in YouTube, even though YouTube is subscribers. It works on TikTok. Like, it works in all the places. And so you're being intentional about it. And sometimes that piece you pull out is even stronger than the original piece of content. With traditional repurposing, most of the stuff you pull out is not as good as the original piece of content. And so that's our main approach. But, you mentioned tool-wise, it starts with, knowing exactly what you're going to do, like ahead of time. And then Descript is the tool that I use. I say Descript is the greatest invention since the iPhone. I have a blog post about why Descript is so great at whydescript.com, whydescript.com. But it is they have tools in there where I can go into my podcast. I can highlight the section that I'm going to pull out, in this case, the TSL module. I can apply what they call a layout, and I have some layouts that they have their own, but I have some that I've built with my own brand colors. And within 3 seconds, it can reformat it to be vertical with my brand color captions right in the middle and a logo in the corner if I want. So yes, modern tech is a big part of why this has all gotten so doable now. In a way, like half the stuff I teach, I couldn't have done 2 years ago because it would have taken 10 hours a week, just like you said.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And so let's talk a little bit about, all of this stuff has helped you streamline and scale what you're doing, but you're doing it for personal freedom. So can you maybe, you don't have to, you can get as personal as you want to get on this, but you're a family man. Like what does implementing this method do for someone like you?
Well, I will say, I think in the intro you said, to do things that are meaningful. And I kind of started off with that message. And then somebody was like, well, what if I just want to binge watch, Love is Blind, the reality TV show? And I'm like,
oh God,
whatever brings you joy, that's fine. That's totally fine. And the idea is not that you have to be done by lunch. Some people do their best work between 1 and 5 a.m. or whatever it might be. But the idea is you have time for the other things in your life. And so for me, it started off just trying to change that perception of, dad works all the time. the next thing that I invested in was my health. I was not, as a lot of entrepreneurs do, I was not paying attention to my health very well at all. Now I hike 5 days a week, lift weights a couple of days a week because I have time, and I listen to podcasts and things like that too. More time with family. We have location freedom. So like in 2021, we went on the road for 6 months while the kids were doing remote school anyway.
Wow.
2 summers ago, we went to Australia, New Zealand, and Japan for 6 weeks. Last summer, we explored the Western United States and Canada. This summer, we're going to Europe for the first time. So those are some of the things that it's made possible.
Outstanding.
For me. And it's part of what makes it all worth it. But I also sort of have this personal mission behind it too. I really think, especially with the current chaos in a lot of the world right now, entrepreneurs are improving the world more than anybody. And I know there's so many people out there that have something that can help somebody else. And so I kind of want to make sure that they can do it before they burn out. And if we start building our businesses with these low leverage tactics, like going in Facebook groups and waiting for the post where they say, you can promote your stuff in this thread and 250 people do, or, that kind of stuff, you're going to burn out before you have the chance to help that person that really needs your help. And so that's kind of part of my mission is I want to help entrepreneurs build in a high leverage way. That's why over 90% of my content is free on YouTube and the podcast and stuff like that. And it really makes me happy to see that happening and getting away from this, it's not that people want to hustle. I think some of that culture has died down, but they feel like they still have to. And I want people to know that they don't if they start building in a high leverage way, even if it's a couple hours a week.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't realize it until it's too late, right? Until they really they've got like I said, health issues, or even worse, they're on like their third spouse or estranged kids or whatever. It's like if you're getting into this thing, you could prevent a lot of that stuff so that you can live life on your terms. And this has just been outstanding. I know we've sort of left the chat in the lurch, and I certainly don't want to do that. Florence is saying, say that again. Efficient and effective are different. Yeah, that's definitely a mic drop moment. That might make a clip. I'm thinking maybe later, Jerry. That
Put script.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Tag me, release it as a collaboration. It'll reach more people.
Oh, exactly. So I want to be sure that we're, because there are people here right now that, they're just listening, or maybe they've come in late on the video. I want to be sure that they have an opportunity to land where they want to land. The website is donebylunch.co, and we've got that on the screen here. Look at that nice plaque, and you've got that plaque behind you as well. When did you cross that 100,000 mark there to get that plaque?
2021, but I tell people all the time, like I have it there because it's obviously good authority and social proof, but it's not about the plaque. The plaque is mostly foam.
Really?
I would give up the plaque in a second, as long as I got to keep all the people that I've been able to reach and help. Now, again, I'm not like, oh, who needs a plaque? Like, it's kind of cool, but at the same time, it is this foam thing that they send you, and the impact of YouTube is so much more than a plaque. I always tell people the plaque should not be your goal. If you get there, awesome. But so many cool things are going to happen before you get there, hopefully.
That's awesome. And of course, the podcast, ladies and gentlemen, is donebylunchpodcast.com. I learned a little hack. I shared this with Jerry earlier. Follow him on LinkedIn as well. He's a great follow on LinkedIn. I learned this little hack for those of you who have podcasts and audio podcasts specifically. Episodes.fm. You put your this is free. Jerry went in and said, how much do I pay you? And they said nothing. You put in your RSS feed, which everyone gets when they create a podcast, and it creates this really cool website where someone in less friction, I believe, was the comment that you said, because that is the biggest deal for podcasting right now, is creating less friction, and for you to say, here's my podcast, here's the link, and then they go and they can just be off to the races and listen and or watch. And so podcast episodes.fm was the hack on that. So Jerry, this has been awesome, man. Is there anything else that we've missed on this? I feel like we went in 17 different directions, but you absolutely landed the plane on this. Is there? I'll give you the last word before we sign off, sir.
Well, two things real quick. So one, if you want to learn more about the whole idea of modcasting, because I kind of went through it quickly here, but we have what we call it a 2025 podcasting deep dive, but we basically show you how to make a modcast. It's free. You can go to quitpodcasting.com because we think you should be modcasting. So quitpodcasting.com to check that out. And then the last thing I'll say is with any of this stuff that you're going to pursue, don't take anything that we talked about today and go say, all right, I'm going to throw a video on YouTube like next week. I like that. And I like the romantic notion of just start. But the truth is that I think all of us need to decide that it's important or decide that it's not. And if you can't decide it's important, it's probably not. And if you do believe it's important, then allot the time or invest in whatever you need to invest to learn how to do it better or whatever it might be. Because had I not decided to commit to a year of YouTube, we wouldn't probably be having this conversation right now.
Right.
Awesome. Outstanding. Yeah, I've always said, like, I used to, for years as a podcast coach, I would be like, come on, you got to got to put in the reps, Then eventually you just realize this person hates doing it.
We're going to get right back to the show, but first I wanted to introduce you to the amazing Cloudlifter CL1 from Cloud Microphones. This amazing little blue box boosts your dynamic podcast mic signal for pristine audio quality in just seconds. Jim and I love ours, and you can snag one of these CL1s or new Cloudlifter X's for yourself from the links in the show notes below. Elevate your audio content with the Cloudlifter. Now, back to the show.
They don't love, and nobody wants to hear or see someone that doesn't love what they're doing, So, you have to find your place in this thing. And Jerry, this has been outstanding, just tons of value. Thank you for making our show better today. And for those of you who are still watching, don't fear your gear.
Thanks for listening to Dealcasters. Congratulations, you've taken another step forward in your content creation journey. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe or follow button here in your favorite podcast player so you can be reminded every time we drop an episode.
We love hearing from our listeners and viewers. And if you're wanting to watch our shows live on Amazon, feel free to follow Dealcasters Live as well at dealcasters.live. Follow us on Twitter or subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we also included added content that you cannot find anywhere else.
If you have questions about this episode or have something you want us to review, you can also email us at dealcasters@dealcasters.live. Thanks again for listening, and you know the deal. Don't fear the gear.